Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and our main topic tonight, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu inching closer and closer to a plea agreement regarding the 3 corruption trials in which he's involved. According to a report released by Israeli journalist Ben Caspit, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was offered a plea deal that will lower his charges in cases 1,000 and 4,000, in addition to entirely dropping charges in case 2,000. But Netanyahu has not yet approved this deal, despite reports that he's increasingly interested. Before signing his name, Netanyahu primarily wants the clause of moral turpitude to be removed, so that when he finishes his sentence, he'll be able to run again for office without waiting a whopping 7 years. And of course, this is not the only point of contention. So what exactly is in the deal, and how likely is Bibi to accept the terms? Joining me to discuss are Michael Kleiner, former member of the Likud Party and the president of the Likud Party Supreme Court, and columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Marc Schulman. Thank you both so much for joining us. Now, first off, I actually want to turn to you, Michael. Netanyahu is giving the green light here to negotiate a deal. Do you think that the deal on the table is fair?
No, but I believe it was not justified. The charges against Netanyahu were unjustified. But regarding the positions and the possibilities and the limitation of the parties and public opinion involved, I believe it is trying hard to be balanced in a way. And if we could take out the element of a mark of disgrace, or how you call it, somebody told me scarlet letter, the moral part, if you could take it out and leave it with the terms, with the punishment, with the fine to be paid, and the articles of the law that were breached, it will be a much better deal, and then we can say it is a fair one. I believe it doesn't deserve, after so many years, he served the country, he sacrificed for the country, he is beloved by most of the population. Well, he's the most popular candidate to become prime minister.
But with all due respect, but Michael, with all due respect, his track record, which he did a lot in his tenure for the country, and there's no doubt about that, and there's no denying that, but that's irrelevant to the charges. Now, Mark, I want to ask you the same question. Do you believe that the charges, or rather that the deal now on the table before Netanyahu is a fair deal?
Depends on how you define it's fair. Look, he knows more than anything else. If he takes the deal, he knows he's guilty, and that's the reality if he makes the deal. If he thought he was actually innocent, then he wouldn't take the deal and he would fight it to the very end. I don't think there could be any question. There has to be what has to be called the scarlet letter in this case, or mark, so that he does not run again, or at least not for 7 years, that he leaves politics for that period of time. Otherwise, it's all totally meaningless. I'm a little bit upset about eliminating the 2000 case completely, because I think the people of Israel need to hear what took place and understand what took place, and also because it also puts the situation of Nomi Moses, the publisher of Ma'ariv and other things, who's on the other side of the potential bribery charge. It sort of makes it questionable whether they can continue to prosecute him, although technically you can. And again, all of the things that were done were caught on tape, and we have tapes of all those things. So on one level, I think the people of Israel need to hear all of the information and everything. And I think the only way to do that is to go through a trial, because otherwise it'll always be said, oh, look, he just got, this limited thing. It was all a big hoax. And on the other hand, listen, I'm not looking for him to go to jail per se. I mean, I think it's a shame, the thought that a second Israeli prime minister after a president goes to jail. And I think that's a mark of shame on the country. But on the other hand, it's really a question of will all the truth come out of what took place? So I'm torn when it comes to this, to be quite honest with you. Well,
yeah.
I think, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you maybe to expand on the issue of moral turpitude and what exactly that means and what that means for Netanyahu. If you could answer that in your time.
Okay. Okay, so sure. So the moral turpitude is a legal term in Israel, which is called a kalon, which basically means that if you get that for 7 years, you're not allowed to serve in public office for 7 years. And of course, when Netanyahu's age, you're saying he'll come back to public office at 79 or 80. I mean, I guess in the age of Joe Biden, that's a young man still. But leave that part aside. The reality would mean at the end of his public career at this point. He's not the Aryeh Deri, who was 26 or 27 the first time he got a kalon and was able to come back. I think what it means is the case was serious enough to have a kalon. And generally speaking, those cases where people get jail time of 6 months or more, they automatically get a kalon. In this case, it can be agreed to. In other words, instead of getting jail time, he'll get jail time, but instead of doing it in jail, he'll do what's called avodat sherut, which means public service work for that period of time.
So
look, the charges against him were very serious. So the question is, he knows if he's guilty or not more than any of us do.
all right, Michael,
the only serious charge is bribery, and this one was dropped by the persecution, and they know why. And
no, they don't know.
Look, all the details were brought in all the papers before the public, and the public gave a verdict. They voted for him again and again. According to the polls, he is the most popular candidate to become prime minister. So this must be taken into consideration. And if, as Aaron Barak, the ex-president of the Supreme Court that is supporting this deal, explains, it is time to heal the wounds. If you want to heal the wounds among the Israeli public, you don't do it by giving public works to an ex-prime minister or saying it is a disgrace or a mark of shame or something like that.
No, listen, 25% of the Israeli public loves former Prime Minister Netanyahu, no question about it. But it's 25%. Just because 25% of the country...
No, it's not against any candidate. One against one.
It doesn't make a difference what the people think in terms of that. It's a question of the law and a question of having broken the law. And listen, I'll leave aside 2,000, 4,000, case 1,000, where he received over $100,000 worth of gifts, and no one questions the actual facts of this matter, which is against the Israeli law. And someone who breaks the law to that extent should not be in politics after it's been found guilty of doing that. I don't say he should go to jail. I'd be very happy if he retires to wherever he's going to retire to after admitting the crimes. And so the public understands that this was not, and this is the biggest problem. The public believes, after all of the screaming by people of the Likud, that the case was made up after the police commissioner who was appointed by him and who's generally was right-wing, and the Yoetz HaMishpati, the Attorney General, was appointed by Prime Minister Netanyahu, was also generally right-wing, all found enough cause to bring this case, and they're still talking about the fact that this was a made-up case. And I think that has to be put to an end.
The charges that were left now, after bribery is taken away, are a breach of trust. Breach of trust, the Afarat Emunim, is a charge or article of the law, criminal law, which doesn't exist in most democratic countries because it is the only guilt in the criminal code of a country which is decided not before, but after some behavior, then the courts come and say it was criminal. This is something illegal against the principle of laws and doesn't exist in most democratic countries.
Excuse me, you can define it any way you want. Receiving gifts which you're not allowed to receive to the amount of $100,000, and I won't go into all the other cases, which I think are still very strong, is a violation of law, and a significant law.
All right. Well,
I don't want to go into the legalities.
I want to hold it. I want to hold it here, actually, because we can argue the points of the case.
Side of the picture, there was no intent to break the law, there was no knowledge of breaking the law, and it was among friends. And if you get gifts of somebody, he's your friend, and not because of politics, so it is allowed. And Mr. Milchen described himself in all the media in Israel and also personally when he met Netanyahu as one of his best friends.
All right, well, so I want to move away from the details of the case itself, and I want to move back towards a possibility, because moral turpitude or not, if Netanyahu accepts a deal and leaves politics for any window of time, we're going to look at, we're going to see a huge shakeup in the Knesset. What happens to the opposition? What happens to the Likud? Michael.
Oh, in the Likud, we are a democratic party. There is a constitution. According to the constitution, after 3 weeks, the Central Committee of the Likud elects a temporary prime minister, a temporary candidate for prime minister and leader of the party. And after 3 months, there are primaries among all the members of Likud take place. So probably immediately after 3 weeks, the Likud will have a temporary leader, which probably will try to negotiate a government and of the right wing, materializing the 72 to 80 members of Knesset the right has in the current Israeli Knesset, which its term only expires in 4 years.
Well, do you think that they would actually successfully be able to garner those seats when there is already an existing coalition, regardless of the fact that the coalition includes right-wing parties?
This is an artificial government with right and left, which is paralyzed and came into being only because some people in the right were very much anti-Netanyahu. And the moment Netanyahu is going away, the glue of this coalition suddenly disappears. And then the natural coalition, a coherent right-wing coalition with all the right-wing parties who agree on everything and not disagree on everything like the current government.
So Mark,
I think it's good.
No, go ahead, Mark.
I think it's possible, but I'm not sure it's 100% because the other issue is the question of the ultra-Orthodox.
Yeah, nothing is 100% in Israel. Nothing is 100%.
No, but I think the other part of the glue of this coalition is against the ultra-Orthodox in a sense, not wanting them as part of the coalition. And even from the Naftali Bennett's party, from people who are modern religious, all the way across the rest of the spectrum, almost everybody in the current government wants to make reforms that the ultra-Orthodox will not go along with. And the natural, quote-unquote, right-wing government that Michael is talking about includes the ultra-Orthodox. So I'm not quite sure that this natural government he's talking about is necessarily likely to come about at this point. Well, also, keep in mind, look, the difference between
the Orthodox are closer. The Orthodox are closer to the ultra-Orthodox than the left. And Yvette Lieberman was, to remind you, many years in the coalitions with Aryeh Deri and with the Haredim, and they got along very well. And the reason Lieberman left was Netanyahu, and not a real dispute with ultra-Orthodox. This was only the public cover or excuse.
Well, I'd like to add actually briefly before your response, Mark, that even recently, while coalition members are downplaying the risk of dissolving, with the absence of Netanyahu, at the same time, it largely was voted in on an anti-Netanyahu basis. And Lapid, back in March of 2021, said, and I quote, "I'll consider any script that leads to removing Netanyahu from power." So what is the glue? You're alleging the ultra-Orthodox parties, but is that enough of a glue to hold together, 61 seats?
Look, there's also momentum. Let's keep that in mind. There's also, look, if there ever came a time when there'd be a big right-left issue, which there hasn't been, and there isn't likely to be anytime soon, unless there's suddenly, a change in Arab leadership and there's suddenly a question of a peace plan on the table or something else like that. There is not an issue right now that divides the right and left of the Israeli government, the current government, that much. Yeah, there are nuances here and there quite clearly, and they distribute on certain
things. What are you speaking about? Every week there is an issue. Every week there is a law of citizenship, the Arab settlements in the Negev, the law of electricity. Every week you have a crisis in this government. Look at Channel 99 in the Knesset.
You have issues that are discussed. Look, I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I'm saying it's much less likely to happen than one thinks of, and it'll certainly take time. I don't think that the temporary leader, and certainly if he's most likely going to be Katz, which is the most likely chance if it's decided by the Central Committee of Likud, I don't think he will be able to put together a coalition and replace Naftali Bennett.
Why do you think Israel Katz? I'm sorry to interrupt, but why do you think Israel Katz would be the most obvious choice over, Nir Barkat or Yuli Edelstein or some of the other big names in the Likud?
Because look, I mean, Michael knows better than me. He knows the politics of the Likud, but from the best of my understanding,
I fully believe your analyzation of the Likud is correct.
Right. So he has the most connections within the central party. He's been the most active member. He's been a member since he's a child, practically, since a student. He's been a member of the Likud, and he's done a very good job internally, politically, and I think he's the most powerful person within the Central Committee. If it goes to a primaries within the Likud, that's a whole other matter. And I think if there's going to be a replacement for the government, people, even amongst the people who would like to join a new government, will wait until there's primaries in the Likud and know who the permanent head of the Likud is, and not jump ship in the middle and not know what's going to happen. So I think if there's any scenario for this government to fall apart, it's possibly to happen 3 months plus, whatever time it takes for Likud to organize its primaries and has a permanent head of Likud. Then there's something to discuss, and then people know who they're talking to and who they're talking about. I don't think people are going to jump ship so quickly to a temporary head of state. And also, I don't think Katz has the respect in the country that's high enough for people to say, well, we're just waiting for someone from Likud to take over. I think if Nir Barkat or somebody else, there may be a different calculation. That's just my sense of the politics at the moment.
Nobody will be Netanyahu, but the moment a new leader is elected, immediately the support jumps. It happened with Golda Meir. It happened with Levi Eshkol. It happened with Yitzhak Shamir. People who come after, especially those who come after strong leaders like Begin or Netanyahu, the moment they're elected, the office builds your popularity afterwards.
There were polls back before the most recent election. However, there were scenario polls in which the Likud had a different leadership, Israel Katz, Nir Barkat, Yuli Edelstein, etc. There were many different scenarios that were run with Netanyahu out of the picture. They all seem to point to a Likud dropping in the number of seats in the Knesset. How do you respond, Michael?
Yeah, many people, who love Bibi so much, those people who made something amazing, with the donations, 3 million shekels, without a real organizer, that people are giving them money, poor people, of such a big support, if Netanyahu makes a deal, will be very disappointed. The answer to polls will be, we stay at home. They will not. They say we don't want to go and vote, and that's why the Likud will drop under any other leader. But history teaches us that after some time, they see the new leader and they slowly come back.
Okay, it depends on the leader, quite clearly. Look, charismatic leadership, and no one's going to take away from the fact that Netanyahu is a charismatic leader. And charismatic leadership gets people out to vote and gets support. Who will replace Netanyahu and Likud? There are a lot of options. None of them will be at Netanyahu's level when they start. But let's keep in mind something. No one is going to be at the same level of someone who's been a prime minister for so many years. It doesn't make a difference who you are. Even if you have the greatest capability possible, you don't have the experience. And no one has this experience. So we'll have to see. Look, one of Netanyahu's greatest strengths has been his oratory abilities, both in English and in Hebrew. No one is quite is at his level in terms of an orator, not on the Likud, and not quite frankly in the opposition parties as well. So that's a big plus when you're running for election.
Let me remind you that when Yitzhak Shamir replaced Menachem Begin in 1984, Begin was an orator and charismatic, and 81 is a great speech in Kikar Melchei Israel, and he won election with more than 40 seats. And then came Shamir, who was a very bad orator. He didn't have the charisma. He didn't draw up the big publics like Menachem Begin. At the end of the day, when people came to vote, he got more than 46, and a draw with Shimon Peres, which nobody believed, which brought a rotation government, and then Shamir himself becoming prime minister against Peres.
But those were the days when the big parties were dominant. The big parties aren't as dominant today as they once were. And
there's only one big party, and it is Likud. Likud is still dominant.
Well, it's
like
dominant,
it was. The Labour Party disappeared.
But not the same numbers as it used to be. Its supporters are split with Shas.
It was. Shamir got 41, and Netanyahu last election, second round, got 36. So not such a big difference.
All right. Now, you mentioned earlier some of the crises, Michael, in the coalition. Again, I just want to jump back to that. Some of these crises are somewhat manufactured from the opposition. For example, you brought up the citizenship law. That's something that the opposition largely agrees on, but voted against in order to embarrass the current government. Do you really think that these crises are enough to derail the coalition?
No, they will, because always, yesterday, Meretz, member of Knesset, caused a victory for the opposition on some religious law, and tomorrow it will be a nationalist law. Always the split between left and right in the existing government, every vote almost, every significant vote, forces half of the coalition to vote against the voters, against their convictions, against their beliefs, against their views, and it cannot exist. It's artificial, and the alternative is a coherent government of people who agree with each other. This is a task of a government, to be able to operate, to act on policy, and this will only be in a right-wing government that will materialize the 70 to 82, if we count also Benny Gantz, people who are center-right.
All right, Mark, any final comments?
Yeah, like I said, I think I have my doubts how quickly this will come about. It may eventually come about, but we'll have to see. We also don't know if there's actually going to be a deal. Let's keep in mind the fact that it does not look like there's going to be a deal in the period of time that Mendelblit is still the Attorney General. The time is clicking away. I don't think it's going to happen. You're going to start with a new Attorney General. It could take months and months until the deal is actually worked out. So if that's the case, who knows? You know, things change very rapidly in our part of the world, and who knows what everything's going to look like, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. There are a lot of externalities that are taking place in the world right now. That will
After it was published, I don't believe that Netanyahu has so many choices, and if there will be no deal, so the whole process damaged Netanyahu a lot.
All right, well, we'll find out very soon whether or not this falls one way or another. We'll find out. Marc Schulman.
That's why I think that there will be a deal. There will be a deal.
We'll find out. We'll find out very soon, and I hope to have you back.
No, nothing is sure in Israel. No.
Well, I hope to have you back when we find out the final results. Michael Kleiner, Marc Schulman, thank you so much for joining us, and of course, everybody who's at home watching, thank you for joining us. I'm Aaron Porras. Please tune in next time on Insider for more on everything Israel. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover next, let us know about it in the comment sections online. And finally, for more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv and sign up for our brand new streaming platform, ILTV Plus. Thank you so much. Be well. We'll see you soon.